What happens when a respected actor finally says, enough is enough to a host who has gone too far? It only took one cutting remark about his personal life for the entire set to erupt into chaos. Cameras still rolling as one of daytime television's biggest names walked off in disgust. The Loose Women's studio buzzed with its usual energy as Ralph Little settled into the guest chair. The actor, beloved for his role in Death in Paradise and his earlier work in the royal family, had come on the show to discuss his career and upcoming projects. Sitting across from him were Denise Welch, Ruth Langsford, Janet Street Porter, and Nadia Sawalha. The panel seemed friendly enough at first, exchanging pleasantries and welcoming laughs. Denise leaned forward with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "So, Ralph, lovely to have you here. We've been dying to talk to you." "Thanks for having me," Ralph replied warmly. "Always nice to be here." Ruth began with a gentle question about his time filming in the Caribbean, and Ralph answered enthusiastically, describing the beautiful locations and the wonderful crew he worked with. The conversation flowed naturally for the first few minutes. Janet asked about his acting process, and Nadia inquired about his favorite episodes. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Then, Denise took control of the conversation. "You know, Ralph, I have to ask," Denise said, her tone shifting slightly. "You've been quite vocal on social media lately about certain issues. Some people might say you have rather strong opinions." Ralph's expression remained pleasant, but cautious. "I think everyone's entitled to their opinions, Denise. I just happen to share mine sometimes." "But don't you think," Denise continued, leaning back in her chair with an air of superiority, "that actors should maybe stick to acting? Leave the real thinking to others?" The other panelists shifted uncomfortably. Ruth glanced at Denise with a slight frown. Nadia looked down at her notes. Ralph kept his composure. "I think actors are people too, Denise. We're allowed to have thoughts about the world we live in." Of course," Denise said dismissively, waving her hand. "But when you have a platform like yours, don't you think you have a responsibility to not, well, mislead people with your little opinions?" "Little opinions?" Ralph repeated, his voice still calm, but with an edge creeping in. "I'm not sure what you mean by that." Janet tried to intervene. "Well, I think what Denise is trying to say is—" "I know what I'm trying to say, Janet," Denise interrupted sharply. She turned back to Ralph. "Look, you're a wonderful actor. Truly. But some of the things you post online, darling, they're just not very well thought out, are they?" Ralph sat up straighter. "I put quite a lot of thought into what I share, actually." "Do you, though?" Denise challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're just jumping on whatever bandwagon happens to be passing by." Ruth tried again. "Denise, maybe we should—" No, it's fine," Ralph said, though his jaw was tightening. "If Denise has something to say, I'd rather she just say it directly." "All right then," Denise said, sitting forward again. "I think you use your platform irresponsibly. I think you comment on things you don't fully understand, and I think you do it for attention." The studio audience gasped. Nadia's eyes widened. Ruth looked genuinely shocked. "That's quite an accusation," Ralph said quietly. "It's an observation," Denise shot back, "and I'm not the only one who thinks it. We've had people writing in, saying the same thing." "Have you now?" Ralph said, his voice flat. "Yes, we have," Denise insisted. "People are tired of celebrities thinking they know everything about everything." "You're an actor, Ralph. A good one. But that doesn't make you an expert on politics, social issues, or anything else you seem to think you can lecture people about." "I've never claimed to be an expert," Ralph replied, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I've claimed to be a human being with thoughts and feelings about the world around me." "Well, maybe you should keep those thoughts and feelings to yourself," Denise said coldly. "Maybe you should practice what you preach," Ralph countered. Denise's face reddened slightly. "Excuse me? You're sitting here telling me I shouldn't share my opinions, while literally sharing your opinion about my opinions," Ralph pointed out. "Do you not see the irony in that?" That's completely different, Denise snapped. This is my job. This is what I do. I'm paid to have opinions and share them. And I'm not allowed the same courtesy. Because why exactly? Ralf asked. Because I have a responsibility to the public, Denise said, as if this explained everything. I have to call out people when they're misleading others. Misleading them how? Ralf pressed. By sharing my perspective? By engaging in conversations about topics that matter to me? By pretending you're an authority on things you know nothing about, Denise said sharply. I've never pretended to be an authority, Ralf replied, his frustration becoming more evident. I've shared my thoughts. I've asked questions. I've encouraged discussions. How is any of that pretending to be an authority? The way you present yourself, Denise said dismissively. The confidence with which you speak about complex issues as if they're simple. Maybe they're not as complicated as you want them to be, Ralf suggested. Maybe some things really are about basic human decency and common sense. Denise laughed sharply. Common sense? Oh, and that's rich coming from someone who lives in a bubble. A bubble? Ralf repeated, his voice rising slightly. What bubble am I living in exactly? The celebrity bubble, Denise said, as if it were obvious. You have money, fame, privilege. You don't live in the real world like the rest of us. Ruth interjected carefully. Denise, I'm not sure that's entirely fair. It's completely fair, Denise insisted. He doesn't know what it's like to struggle, to worry about paying bills, to deal with the real problems that ordinary people face. And you do? Ralf asked pointedly. Denise's eyes flashed. More than you, certainly. You're sitting here on a nationally televised talk show, getting paid to share your opinions, Ralf said slowly. And you're telling me that I'm the one who's out of touch? I worked for everything I have, Denise said defensively. And I didn't? Ralf asked incredulously. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked? How many auditions I went to? How many times I was rejected? How many years of uncertainty I faced before I got my first real break? That's not the point, Denise said. Then what is the point? Ralf demanded. Because it seems to me that the point is, you don't like what I have to say, so you're trying to discredit me by attacking my character instead of addressing my actual arguments. Your arguments? Denise scoffed. You mean your uninformed ramblings on social media? The audience gasped again, and several people could be heard murmuring their disapproval. Uninformed ramblings, Ralf repeated slowly. Is that what you think they are? What else would you call them? Denise asked. I would call them the thoughts of a concerned citizen, Ralf said firmly. I would call them the reflections of someone who cares about the world and wants to make it better. How noble, Denise said sarcastically. And I'm not allowed the same courtesy because why exactly? Ralf asked. Because you're not qualified, Denise exclaimed, her voice rising. Ruth jumped in. Okay, I think we need to take a breath here and... No, Ruth. I want to hear this, Ralf said, his eyes locked on Denise. What qualifications do you have that I don't? What makes your opinions more valid than mine? I've been doing this for years, Denise said defensively. I've earned my place on this panel. I've studied issues. I've researched topics. I've interviewed experts. I know what I'm talking about. And you think I haven't? Ralf asked. You think I just wake up and tweet random thoughts without any consideration? Without doing my own research? Without talking to people? That's exactly what it looks like, Denise retorted. I've been doing this for years, Denise said defensively. I've earned my place on this panel. And I've earned my right to speak my mind, Ralf said firmly. Just like anyone else. Denise laughed, but it was not a friendly sound. Oh, please. You're just another celebrity with a Twitter account, thinking that gives you the right to tell everyone else how to live their lives. I've never told anyone how to live their lives, Ralf said, his voice steady, despite the obvious frustration. I share my perspective. People are free to agree or disagree. Your perspective, Denise repeated mockingly. Your perspective on things you know nothing about. And what exactly do I know nothing about? Ralf challenged. Where do I even start? Denise said, throwing her hands up. Politics, social policy, economics. I've never claimed to be an economist, Ralph interrupted. No, but you've certainly commented on economic issues, as if you were one, Denise said. Janet tried to mediate. I think perhaps we're getting a bit heated here. Maybe we should... Stay out of this, Janet, Denise said sharply, not taking her eyes off Ralph. The audience had gone completely silent. The tension was thick enough to cut. Nadia looked like she wanted to disappear. Ruth's face showed clear disapproval of how this was unfolding. You know what I think? Denise continued, her voice dripping with condescension. I think you're so used to everyone telling you how wonderful you are that you can't handle being challenged. You can't handle someone actually questioning whether you know what you're talking about. I can handle being challenged just fine, Ralph said evenly. What I can't handle is being talked down to by someone who thinks their opinion is worth more than mine, simply because they have a talk show. How dare you? Denise breathed. How dare I what? Ralph asked. Point out that you're being a hypocrite? Point out that you're doing exactly what you're accusing me of? I am not a hypocrite, Denise insisted, her voice getting louder. Really? Ralph said. Because you're sitting here, on national television, telling me I shouldn't share my thoughts publicly, while you share your thoughts publicly. If that's not hypocrisy, I don't know what is. This is different, Denise shouted. Why? Because you say so? Ralph shot back. Ruth attempted to regain control. Okay, let's everyone just calm down for a moment. I am calm, Ralph said, though his knuckles were white as he gripped the armrest of his chair. Well, I'm not, Denise declared. I'm tired of entitled celebrities thinking they can say whatever they want without consequences. Entitled? Ralph repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. You're calling me entitled? Yes, I am, Denise said defiantly. You think because people like you on a TV show that somehow makes your opinion matter more than the average person's. When that's the definition of entitled. I've never suggested my opinion matters more than anyone else's, Ralph said through gritted teeth. But it certainly doesn't matter less, which is what you seem to be implying. What I'm implying, Denise said, is that you should stay in your lane. My lane, Ralph said slowly. And what lane is that exactly? Acting, Denise said simply. Do what you're good at, and leave the rest to people who actually know what they're talking about. Nadia finally spoke up. Denise, I think maybe that's a bit what? Denise snapped at her. A bit honest? Well, sorry if the truth hurts. The truth, Ralph said, shaking his head. You wouldn't know the truth if it slapped you in the face. The audience gasped again. Denise's mouth dropped open. What did you just say to me? She demanded. You heard me, Ralph said. You sit here, day after day, giving your opinions on everything under the sun. But the moment someone else does the same thing, you attack them for it. You tell them they're not qualified, they're not educated enough. They should stay quiet. Do you not see how utterly ridiculous that is? I have every right to my opinions, Denise said defensively. And so do I, Ralph exclaimed. That's the entire point. But apparently, in your world, only certain people get that right. Only people you deem worthy. That's not what I'm saying, Denise protested. Then what are you saying? Ralph demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you think you're somehow better than me. More important. More deserving of a voice. I've worked hard to get where I am, Denise said. And I haven't? Ralph asked incredulously. I've been acting since I was a teenager. I've worked on countless productions. I've studied my craft. But because I also happen to care about things outside of acting, that makes me what? Unqualified to speak? It makes you naive, Denise said cruelly. Ruth intervened firmly this time. Denise, that's enough. No, let her continue, Ralph said bitterly. I want to hear what else she thinks about me. You want to know what I think? Denise said, her voice cold. I think you're a privileged man who has had everything handed to him and now thinks he's some sort of voice for the people. I think you're out of touch with reality, and I think your opinions are worthless. The entire panel fell silent. Even Denise seemed to realize she had gone too far, but she did not take it back. She sat there, staring at Ralf with defiance in her eyes. Ralf stared back at her for a long moment. His face had gone pale, then flushed. His hands were trembling slightly. Worthless, he repeated quietly. That's what I said, Denise confirmed, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Denise, please, Nadia said softly. Ralf stood up slowly. The microphone pack attached to his belt became visible as he rose from his chair. His expression was one of barely contained anger and deep hurt. You know what, Denise, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I came here today in good faith. I came here to have a conversation, to talk about my work, maybe have a laugh. But instead, you've spent the last several minutes attacking me personally, questioning my intelligence, dismissing my right to have thoughts and feelings about the world I live in. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Denise said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. Dramatic? Ralf said. You just called my opinions worthless on national television. You told me I should stay in my lane, as if I'm not allowed to be a full human being with concerns beyond my job. You've been condescending, rude, and frankly bullying. Now wait just a minute, Denise started. No, Ralf cut her off. I'm done waiting. I'm done sitting here being insulted by someone who clearly has no respect for me or anyone else who dares to think differently than she does. Ruth tried to calm the situation. Ralf, please, let's just take a moment. I appreciate you trying, Ruth, Ralf said, his voice softer when he addressed her. But I think it's pretty clear that I'm not welcome here. At least not unless I'm willing to sit quietly and be talked down to. He began removing his microphone pack, his hands still shaking slightly with emotion. Janet spoke up. Ralf, you don't have to leave. Yes, I do, Ralf said firmly. Because if I stay, I'm going to say something I'll regret. And unlike some people, I actually care about being respectful, even when I'm angry. Denise's face had gone red. If you can't handle a bit of debate, maybe you're not cut out for public life. Ralf stopped what he was doing and looked directly at her. A bit of debate? Is that what you call that? Telling me I'm naive, entitled, out of touch, and that my opinions are worthless? That's not debate, Denise. That's just being cruel. I was being honest, Denise said, but her voice wavered. No, Ralf said quietly. You were being mean. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that says everything I need to know about you. He finished removing his microphone and placed it carefully on the chair he had been sitting in. Nadia looked close to tears. Ralf, I'm so sorry this happened. It's not your fault, Ralf said gently. You didn't say any of those things. Ruth stood up. Ralf, on behalf of the show, I want to apologize. You don't need to apologize for her, Ralf said. She's a grown woman. She can apologize for herself, if she wants to. Everyone looked at Denise. The studio was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. The audience waited. The other panelists waited. Ralf waited. Denise said nothing. She sat there, her arms crossed, her expression stubborn. Ralf nodded slowly, as if this was exactly what he expected. Right then, he said quietly. I think that tells me everything I need to know. He turned to walk off the set. A producer rushed forward, clearly trying to stop him, but Ralf held up his hand. I'm leaving, he said firmly, but not unkindly to the producer. And I won't be coming back. Not to this show. Not while she's here. Denise finally found her voice. Oh, so you're just going to run away then? Ralf turned back one last time. I'm not running away, Denise. I'm choosing not to be disrespected anymore. There's a difference. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that. You're being ridiculous, Denise said, but her voice had lost its edge. Maybe I am, Ralf said, but at least I'm being honest about how I feel. At least I'm not sitting here pretending that what you did was okay." "What I did?" Denise said incredulously. "You're the one making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" Ralph said, his voice rising slightly. "You attacked me for having opinions. You called me naive and entitled. You said my thoughts were worthless. And I'm the one making a scene because I won't sit here and take it." "If you can't handle criticism," Denise started. "Criticism is fine," Ralph interrupted. "What you did was not criticism. It was an attack, and I don't have to stand for it. Nobody should have to stand for it." Ruth tried one more time. "Ralph, please, let's all just take a breath and start over." Ralph looked at Ruth, and his expression softened. "Ruth, you're a lovely person, and I appreciate what you're trying to do. But I can't start over with someone who has made it abundantly clear that she has no respect for me whatsoever." He glanced at the other panelists. "Janet, Nadia, it was nice seeing you both. I'm sorry this is how it ended." They both nodded, looking deeply uncomfortable. Then Ralph looked back at Denise one final time. "I hope you're proud of yourself," he said quietly. "I hope this was worth it to you." Denise opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Ralph turned and walked off the set. His footsteps echoed in the silent studio. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of his departure. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure of how to react. As Ralph reached the edge of the set, he paused. Without turning around, he spoke one last time, his voice carrying across the studio. "You know, Denise, you talk a lot about people being entitled, but maybe you should look in the mirror. Because sitting there, thinking you have the right to tear someone down just because you disagree with them, that's the real entitlement." And with that, he was gone. The remaining panelists sat in awkward silence. Ruth looked at Denise with clear disapproval. Janet stared down at the desk. Nadia wiped at her eyes. Denise sat frozen, her face a mixture of anger and something that might have been shame. Finally, Ruth spoke, her voice tight. "Well, that certainly didn't go as planned." "He overreacted," Denise said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Did he?" Ruth asked pointedly. "Because from where I was sitting, he reacted exactly as anyone would when they're being attacked." "I wasn't attacking him," Denise protested weakly. "Denise," Janet said quietly, "you called his opinions worthless. What did you think was going to happen?" "I was just being honest," Denise said, but she would not meet anyone's eyes. "There's being honest, and there's being cruel," Nadia said softly. "And what you did was cruel." "Oh, not you too," Denise said, her voice defensive. "Yes, me too," Nadia said, more firmly than before. "What you said to him was wrong, Denise. It was mean and uncalled for." Ruth addressed the camera directly, her professional mask firmly in place despite the tension. "We need to take a quick break. We'll be right back." As soon as they cut to commercial, the set erupted. Producers rushed over. The audience buzzed with shocked conversations, and Denise sat at the desk, suddenly very alone as the reality of what she had done began to sink in. Ruth turned to her, her voice low but fierce. "What were you thinking?" "I was just," Denise started. "You were just what?" Ruth demanded. "Making a guest feel unwelcome? Attacking someone for having opinions? That's not what we do here, Denise." "He was being sanctimonious," Denise said weakly. "No," Janet said firmly. "He was answering your questions. And instead of having a respectful conversation, you went for his throat." "That's not fair," Denise protested. "What's not fair is what you did to that man," Nadia said, her voice shaking. "He came here in good faith, and you humiliated him." A producer approached the desk, looking stressed. "We have a problem. Ralph's left the building. He's not coming back." "Can you blame him?" Ruth asked sharply. The producer looked at Denise. "Do you have anything you want to say? An apology we can air?" Denise sat silently for a moment, her pride warring with her growing realization that she had crossed a line. But still, she said nothing. Unbelievable, Ruth muttered. The producer sighed. All right, we'll have to address this when we come back. The audience saw everything. Social media is already going crazy. What are people saying? Denise asked quietly. The producer looked at her with something close to pity. Nothing good. As the commercial break continued, the panelists prepared to return to air. But the damage was done. The studio felt different now, charged with an uncomfortable energy. And in the silence, everyone knew that this moment would be talked about for a long time to come. Ruth straightened her papers, her movements sharp with barely contained anger. Janet adjusted her glasses, looking troubled. Nadia took a sip of water, her hands still trembling slightly, and Denise sat very still, staring at the empty chair where Ralf had been sitting just minutes ago. The chair sat there like an accusation, a physical reminder of what had just transpired. The microphone pack still rested on it, abandoned in Ralph's hasty but dignified exit. 30 seconds, a crew member called out. Ruth took a deep breath. Janet composed her features. Nadia tried to smile, and Denise finally looked up, her expression unreadable. 15 seconds. The panelists positioned themselves, ready to face the cameras again, ready to address what had just happened. But nothing they said could erase the moment. Nothing could take back the words that had been spoken. 5, 4, 3. The red light on the camera blinked on, and they were live again. The audience applauded uncertainly, the energy in the room completely different from the warm welcome they had given Ralf at the start of the show. Ruth cleared her throat. Welcome back. As you all just saw, our interview with Ralf Little ended rather abruptly. The audience murmured in agreement. Before we continue, Ruth said, glancing pointedly at Denise, I think we need to address what just happened. Denise shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable being put on the spot. Denise, do you have anything you'd like to say? Ruth asked directly. The camera zoomed in on Denise's face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. She started, then paused. I stand by what I said. The audience gasped. Ruth's eyes widened in disbelief. Janet shook her head. Nadia looked away. You stand by it? Ruth repeated, her voice hard. I think celebrities need to be more responsible with their platforms, Denise said, doubling down. That's all I was trying to say. By calling his opinions worthless? Janet asked sharply. By telling him to stay in his lane? I was making a point, Denise said defensively. You were making a scene, Nadia said quietly, but loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Denise glared at her, but Nadia did not back down. Ruth addressed the camera. I want to be very clear. What happened here today was not a reflection of what Loose Women stands for. We believe in respectful discourse, even when we disagree. What our viewers just witnessed was not that. Denise's face reddened, but she remained silent. I think we owe Ralf Little an apology, Ruth continued. He deserved better than what he received here today. The audience applauded, the sound building until it filled the studio. It was clear where their sympathies lay. And through it all, the empty chair remained, a silent testament to the moment when one man had finally said enough was enough and walked away with his dignity intact, leaving behind a host who had revealed far more about herself than she ever intended. The applause continued, washing over the set, as Denise sat in the spotlight, finally understanding that this time she had gone too far. This time, the audience was not on her side. This time, she was the one who had lost,